Today we're going to discuss determination of exchange rate and quotations. Determination of exchange rate and quotations. This evening we're going to focus our attention on determination of exchange rate and quotations. So what actually we have to learn today is how exchange rates are determined and also how to interpret different quotations in order to arrive to the correct or the exact exchange rate between currencies. Now, what is exchange rate? An exchange rate simply means a price of one currency in relation to another currency. Exchange rate simply means the price of buying one currency, but the currency of another country, okay, not of your own country. We do not have exchange rate of a single currency. Exchange rate needs to be between two different currencies, okay? So it simply means the amount of domestic currencies or the amount of money that you will have to pay in order to acquire a single unit of another country's currency. That's what we call an exchange rate, right? So in domestic currency perspective, we might say an exchange rate simply means the number of home currency that is required to be exchanged for one unit of foreign currency. The number of home currency. For instance, if we are in Tanzania, the home currency in Tanzania is the Tanzanian shillings, okay? So the amount of Tanzanian shillings that is required to acquire a single foreign currency, let's say a USD or euro or pound or a Japanese yen. For example, if Tanzania is considered a home, then the exchange rate between Tanzanian shillings and the euro might be 2,500 Tanzanian shillings per 1 euro. Now there's a different way at which you can write this. For instance, you may write like this one, or you may choose to write like this one, okay? Both expressions means the same thing. Sometimes you may even decide to write like this. For instance, 1 euro equals to Tanzanian shillings 2,500. Okay, you can express it like this if you want. In a foreign exchange transaction, there are two individuals involved, dealers and customers. Okay, in any exchange rate transaction, there are two subjects involved, dealers and customers. Dealers are the one who offers foreign currencies for sale. All right, so a dealer does two things. All right, number one, a dealer offers foreign currency for sale, and again the dealer buys foreign currencies that are sold by who? That are sold by the customers. Now, a dealer can be a commercial bank, right? A dealer can be a commercial bank. Now, in any exchange rate quotation, two rates will be provided. The first rate is the one that represents buying rate, and the other one represents the selling rate. Therefore, in a proper exchange rate quotation needs to provide you with two rates, one for buying and one for selling. However, I should insist that it is the dealer who buys and sells. That being the reason, then the exchange rates quotation that are offered, the prices of currency that are offered reflect the dealer and not the customer. So it should be like a mirror image of the customer. If you read that a certain commercial bank sells certain foreign currency at X blah 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 and blah 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 blah, then those prices, the buying and selling, they reflect the dealer. It is the dealer who announces that I am buying, for instance, United States dollar at 2,500 and I'm selling it at 2,550 Tanzanian shillings. That can be an example. So in most cases, we expect that the quotation to be quoted simultaneously. All right, simultaneously it means that in any given quotation, we expect to see both the buying rate and the selling rate. Okay, this is a complete exchange rate quotation. Here I have an example of some quotation that I picked today from some major commercial banks in the country. All right, these are some of the quotations I picked from some major commercial banks in the country. Now, actually, this one is from the National Microfinance Bank, and the other one is from the CRDB. Prices can be the same, prices can be different. Why? It depends with where the dealer receives the foreign currencies that they are offering for sale. All right. So, for instance, if you see on this first dealer here, this first dealer buys USD at 2,339 and sell 1 unit of USD at 2,379. With this dealer, if you are the one who wants to sell, it means the dealer will pay you 2,339. The dealer will buy that 1 unit of USD from you at a price of 2,339, and if you are the one who wants to buy, then the dealer will sell to you for 2,379. Let's look at this second dealer. The second dealer here is willing to buy from you 1 unit of USD at 2,331. That is the price he is willing to pay you for 1 unit of USD. However, if you are the one who wants to buy USD from him, then this dealer is willing to sell you 1 unit of United States dollar at the price of 2,379, which is exactly the same as dealer 1. What if you want to purchase or to sell Japanese yen? Dealer 1 is willing to sell you 1 unit of Japanese yen at 20 Tanzanian shillings. Whereas dealer 2 is willing to sell to you 1 unit of Japanese yen at 19 Tanzanian shillings. But if you, the customer, is the one who wants to sell to these dealers a unit of Japanese yen, then dealer 2 is willing to buy 1 unit of Japanese yen at 14 Tanzanian shillings, whereas dealer 1 is willing to pay you 15 Tanzanian shillings for Japanese yen. So in this context, you can see that If you have 1 unit of Japanese yen, it's much better you go and sell it to dealer 1 rather than dealer 2. However, if you are the one who wants to buy the Japanese yen, then you better go and buy to dealer 2. Now, in any given quotation, okay, in any given quotation, the first quoted rate is the selling rate, and the second quoted rate is the buying rate. Selling rate sometimes is known as the ask, right? Whereas the buying rate is known as the bid. Okay, so please, whenever you are given quotations, you have to know that one rate will represent selling and the other one will represent the buying. Simply say bid and ask. Now, how dealers make profit? The profit that a dealer will make simply means a spread, right? Spread between what? Spread between those two rates, that is the selling rate and the buying rate. All right? For example, if a dealer is willing to sell, okay, is willing to sell 1 unit of Japanese yen at 20 and buys 1 unit of Japanese yen at 18 Tanzanian shillings. What is the spread between these two? The spread simply means the difference between selling rate and the buying rate. Therefore, the spread here will be 2. And this is the profit that the dealer will make if they are to be involved in this transaction. Let's do a practical example. Over this line here, we see that dealer 1 is willing to sell and buy Japanese yen at 15 and 20 Tanzanian shillings. All right. Dealer 1 has given this the following quote: Japanese yen equals to ZS 15.20, right? Whereas dealer 2 has given this quote 14.19. All right. Dealer 2 has provided the following quotation: 1 Japanese yen equals to Tanzanian shillings 14.19. All right, buying, selling, or bid ask. All right. Suppose that we have a bank customer who wants to sell 200,000 Japanese yen. All right, suppose that we have a bank customer who wants to sell, all right? The customer wants to sell 200,000 Japanese yen. And right after selling, another customer immediately, right? This was the first customer. Right after selling, another customer immediately wants to buy all 200 Japanese yen. What will be profit? What will be the profit that these two dealers will make? It is simple. all we have to do is that, if the customer wants to sell, it means the dealer, who is the bank, will buy. So the dealer will use buying rate. That is to say, now, when the customer is selling, it means the dealer will buy. So the dealer is going to use the buying rate, which is 15. Therefore, 1 Japanese yen equals to 15 Tanzanian shillings. Now this customer have 200,000 Japanese yen. All right, how much will that be? So all you have to do is to multiply the 200,000 by 15, which is going to give you how much? 3 million, right? Tanzanian shillings. This is the amount the bank will pay to the customer, dealer 1. Now, right after buying this Japanese yen, immediately another customer shows up with an intention of buying 200,000 Japanese yen. That means dealer 1 will have to sell. Now, if dealer 1 is selling, it means he will sell at 1 Japanese yen equals to 20 Tanzanian shillings. Then 200,000 equals to how much? Now, if we multiply 200,000 by 20, we're going to end up with 4 million, right? So what is the profit? You see here, dealer 1 is going to make a profit of 1 million. That is the difference between selling and buying. All right. So dealer 1 will make a profit of 1 million Tanzanian shillings. What about dealer 2? Dealer 2 announces that he is willing to buy 1 unit of Japanese yen at 14 and sell at 19. So assuming the same scenario happens to dealer 2, what profit will he make? It's simple. Instead of going through all this tedious work, you can simply take the difference between buying and sell. So simply say spread, which is profit, equals to ask price minus bid price. Okay, therefore spread equals to ask is 19 minus bid is 14, which means now spread equals to 5. All right, now if the spread is 5, then what is the amount in question? The amount in question is 200 Japanese yen. Therefore, if you are to take 200,000 Japanese yen, multiply by 5, you're going to end up with what? You're going to end up with 1 million as a profit. Therefore, both dealers, even though they've given different quotation, but they're going to end up with exactly the same profit. Why? Because the spread between their quotations, okay, quotation of dealer 1 and dealer 2 is the same. Look here, spread equals to ask minus bid. Now ask is 20 and bid is 15, therefore the spread is 5. Now if you take 5 and multiply by 200, you're going to end up with exactly the same answer. Now, what are the determinants of exchange rate? What are the factors that can cause changes in exchange rate? Remember, exchange rate simply means a price of one currency in terms of another. Now, we all know that prices changes, right? Prices can change. So here we want to see or to discuss factors that can cause either prices to go up or to go down. The first determinant is differentials in inflation. What is inflation? Inflation simply means persistent increase in prices of goods and services, implying that too much money purchasing very few goods. That's the meaning of inflation. So, inflation causes the currency, okay? Inflation causes the currency to be weaker. All right? Inflation causes the currency to be weaker. And a weaker currency means that it depreciates in its value. Okay? That's the meaning of a currency to weaken. Let me give you a practical example. We have two countries, right? First country is Tanzania, and the second country is Kenya. All right? Now, we all know that Tanzania uses Tanzanian shillings, whereas the Kenyans uses Kenyan shillings. These are the domestic currencies for both countries. Suppose that there is the current exchange rate, all right? Suppose that the current exchange rate between the currency of these two countries is 1 Kenyan shillings, okay? 1 Kenyan shillings for 100 Tanzanian shillings, okay? This is the current exchange rate. 1 Kenyan shillings for 100 Tanzanian shillings. That means you need 100 Tanzanian shillings to purchase 1 unit of the Kenyan shillings. Now, what will happen if in Kenya or Kenya suffers a serious inflation? If Kenya suffers a serious inflation, it means the Kenyan shillings will depreciate in its value. So the value of the Kenyan shillings will decline. That is to say, in case of a very serious inflation, the exchange rate, 1 Kenyan shillings, maybe will decline to as low as to only 75 Tanzanian shillings or 1 Kenyan shillings. This is the effect of inflation. Therefore, in conclusion, inflation leads to a weaker currency. No any investor will go to invest in a country that has a very serious inflation. Take an example of Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Those are some of the countries which have a very, very high inflation rate. Nobody goes there to invest. All right? For that reason now, the demand, all right, demand of currency of these countries is very, very low. And also, these countries expect or depends more on imports, which continue to weaken furthermore their currencies. Inflation leads to a weaker currency. Now, the second determinant of exchange rate is differentials in interest rate. What is interest rate? In simpler terms, an interest rate simply means a price. Okay, interest rate simply means a price of a loan. Okay, that is the return that the lender will earn if they are to invest their money. Now, why interest rates can determine an exchange rate of a certain country? Let's consider the following example. Consider two countries, country A and country B. The domestic currency for country A is X, and the domestic currency for country B is currency Y. These are the currencies. The interest rate in country A is 4%, same as the interest rate in country B. What does this mean? If we have an investor who live in country C, where the currency of country C is the Z. An investor from country C can easily come to invest in country A or country B and earn exactly the same profit, assuming that other factors are constant, ceteris paribus. Right? Other factors are constant. An investor from country C can come with this currency to invest in country B or in country A, because at the end of the day, the interest rate is similar in these two countries. Now, what will happen if country A raises interest from 4 to 6%, whereas country B keep the very same interest rate? Furthermore, assume that the interest rate in country C is 3%. What information are you getting? What are you getting from this? It is cheaper to borrow in country C and invest in country A, where you'll earn almost double the amount of interest. If this is borrowing interest rate and this is the lend interest rate, it means now it is cheaper to borrow in C, country C, you invest in country A. Conversely, it is cheaper to borrow in country C and invest in country B. However, the profit that you earn if you are to invest in country A and country B with the money from country C is different. From country B, you're going to earn only 1%, while from country A, you're going to earn 3%. That is to say, this interest rate is highly attractive even to investors who are in country B. So investors from both country B and country C will go to invest in country A. But here is the question: what will be the currency for investment? Are you gonna use CY or CZ to invest in country A? The answer is no. You need to convert these currencies, okay? You need to convert these currencies into CX, because CX is the domestic currency of country A. So you will pay salaries using the CX and not CY. You will purchase raw materials using the CX and not CZ. That is to say now, the demand for CX in the foreign exchange market will appreciate. Now, if the demand for CX increases, and so will its price. And remember, the price of the currency simply means an exchange rate. Country A, or the currency, which is CX, will become stronger and stronger every day. That's the reason you see every now and then in the parliament, they're talking of creating better environment for foreign investors. Why? Because when foreign investors come to our country, they come with foreign currencies, but they're supposed to translate the foreign currencies into the domestic currency, making our currency stronger. All right? Look at this. You have this, I think you guys remember this guy, Aliko Dangote. Mr. Aliko came with 400 million USD to invest in Tanzania. But once he was allowed to invest in Tanzania, did he continue to use the USD? No. He converted the USD into TZS. Do you know how much will the 400 million USD be in TZS? It's hell of money. This will be super higher demand of the TZS at the exchange market, at any exchange market. To convert the USD into TZS, that will be super high demand. Automatically, TZS will appreciate in its value. To make the matter even much better, if Mr. Aliko Dangote produces some good cement and sells them in different markets, not only in the Tanzanian market, but also overseas, it means our country will export. Now, what will happen if our country continues to export? If our country continues to export, what will happen is that the term of trade will improve, and also the current account deficit will decline, which means this deficit most likely will decline, and we may have even a positive current account balance. Let me explain this too. Starting with the terms of trade. Terms of trade is the ratio that measures the extent at which export finances imports. So this is a ratio of export to imports. Now, consider the following 3 years, okay? 2020, 2021, 2022. All right. Now, the values for exports are, in 2020, it was 1,000, here 4,000, and here 500. The value for imports were 200, here 800, and here 3,000. Now, what is the TOT? The term of trade, okay, the term of trade in these years will be the ratio of export to import. This will give you TOT. Now, in the year 2020, we export 1,000 units and import only 200 units. So here you get 5, right? TOT. What about here? Here you have 400 by 800. You end up with 5. But what about in the year 2022? 500 by 3,000. You end up with 0.16. How do we interpret this? You can see that in the year 2020 and 21, there was a significant improvement. Now you can see that in the year 2020 to year 2021, the value of export increased by 3,000 units. However, the value of imports, we also imported more. That was the problem. Had we not imported more, or had we imported only or exactly the same units as what we imported in the previous year, then most like here, the term of trade would have improved. Let's assume here we would have imported only 200 units. So it would have been 4,000 by 200, which is going to give you 20. So you would have noticed a significant improvement in the terms of trade. But the problem, what happened here is that we import as well. And here, over here, in the year 2022, the value of export swiftly declined, while that of imports increased to the extent that the TOT was seriously damaged, deteriorated to 0.16. What are we getting from these numbers? It means in the year 2022, your country earned less foreign currency, but it uses a lot of forex because you imported more. Likewise here, you earn much more foreign currency compared to the year 2022, but again you use significant amount of the forex for imports. In the year 2020, you earn a lot of forex, you use less forex. Therefore, if the terms of trade does not improve, deteriorates, the exchange rate will decline. Why? Because if you demand a lot of foreign currencies to import, it means your currency will be weaker. If you do not have anything to export, your currency will be weak. Therefore, whenever you see the terms of trade for your country has declined, expect your domestic currency to depreciate in its value relative to other currencies. But again, current account deficit. Current account is a composition, okay, of the balance of payment, BOP, okay. The BOP has some accounts, okay, and one of which is known as the current account. Now the current account, okay, composed of the following elements. We have balance of trade. Balance of trade is formed by the value of export of goods minus the value of import of goods and the value of export of services minus the value of import of services. Now, if you export more than import, it means balance of trade will be positive. Balance of trade will be positive. There are some other elements in the current account, but the balance of trade constitutes a lot. It contributes a lot in the current account than other elements. That's the reason I'm going to focus only on the balance of trade. For any country to achieve a positive balance of trade, you need to export more than import. To export both goods and services. Because if you export, it means you are earning foreign currencies. The demand for your currency becomes higher. So your currency will appreciate in its value. But if you import, it means you need foreign currency in order to purchase the imports. That means the value of your currency will decline because you are the one who needs the currency of others in order to purchase goods and services from them. In my example here, you can see that in the year 2020, we export more than imports. This can tell me that the exchange rate appreciates. Likewise, in the year 2021, because we export more than import. But in the year 2022, there was a very swift turn. We export less, but we import more. We import almost 6 times the export. 6 times the export, most likely the amount of the export that is required to finance the imports was insufficient because we import 6 times more than what we export. In another way, we incurred some debt. We owe people some money. And therefore, this can lead to a negative balance of trade. Now, since the balance of trade is the high contributor of the current account, the overall result of the current account might end up taking the sign of the balance of trade. If it is positive, most likely you'll have current account surplus. If it is negative, then you're going to end up with current account deficit. What about public debt? Public debt simply means the amount of money that your government borrow in order to finance public expenditure, borrowings by the government. So your government sometimes can borrow externally and internally. Okay, we have external and internal borrowing. Therefore, if you have many debts, okay, if you have many debts, most likely investors will start to be scared of you because they are not even sure if you will be able to repay all these financial obligations. And no any single investor wants to live in dilemma. That's the reason sometimes you hear in parliaments they discuss public debt. Political stability. This is straightforward. If you have serious civil unrest, okay? If you have serious civil unrest, expect that your currency will depreciate in its value. Remember the Arab Spring. Remember civil war in some countries. See some instability in Congo DRC. Some instability in Uganda. That can show you or can evidence to you how political instability can lead to a weaker currency. But if you are politically stable, then your currency will continue to appreciate in its value. Economic performance, if you have a very good market in your country, availability of currency, that means liquidity, okay? Rules and regulations, security, then your country economy will perform very well. Now, by performing, let's say, if you are producing more goods and services, what will happen is that you will export more than to import. Why you will import less? Because you can produce something to consume and you export surplus. That way, your currency will appreciate in its value. Cross-border foreign direct investment. Earlier I gave you an example of Dangote Aliko, FDI. All right. This is when you have investors from different countries coming to invest in your country. These investors will come with foreign currencies, all right? However, at one point in time, they're going to have to translate these foreign currencies into domestic currency, leading to high demand of your domestic currency, all right? And therefore, the exchange rate of the domestic currency as against these forex will change. Your country currency will appreciate in its value. Speculation. That is when individuals speculate about some issues. For example, people can speculate about a rise in interest rate. They can speculate about some chaos due to election. Okay. People can speculate about anything. Now, these speculations have some effects to the economy or to the country currency. Positive speculation or negative speculation both have some sort of effect to the currency. For example, if we speculate that interest rate will rise, let's say from 6% to 8%, this is good news to foreign investors. They know that if they are to come and invest in your country, they'll earn some more. That means now the demand for your country currency will increase, because if they are to come to invest in your country, they will have to purchase your country's currency in order to invest. But if you speculate that the interest rate will be lowered from 6 to, let's say, 4%, that means no investor will even dare to come and invest in your country, because they are not 100% sure if they will earn profit. And even investors who are in your country will decrease the level of investment. And if it's true that the interest rate is going to be lowered to 4%, most likely they will leave the domestic market. Now that we are done with the determinants, let's see currency quotations. Earlier, I showed you some quotations from major commercial banks in the country. And in those quotations, you saw they were in pair. We call it pairwise quotation. That is, there was a buying price and there was selling price. Bid and ask. Now, let's interpret some more to understand it. What do we mean when we say quoted currency and a base currency? In any given exchange rate quotation, a quoted currency simply means a price currency. Quoted currency is also known as a price currency. That is the currency that varies in an exchange rate quotation. Quoted currency is a price currency. That is the currency that varies in an exchange rate quotation. On the other hand, base currency is fixed at one unit or specific unit. Base unit is fixed at either one unit or specific unit. So, in example like this one, 1 USD equals to Tanzanian shillings 2,370. In this, you can see that the base currency is the United States dollar. Why? Because it is fixed at one unit. And the quoted currency or price currency or variable currency is the Tanzanian shillings. Another example can be like this one. 100 units of the USD for Tanzanian shillings right? Again, from here you can see the USD is fixed at 100 units. Therefore, the USD is the base, and the one that varies is the TZS. Therefore, in any single given quotation, you need to be able to identify the base and the price currency. Now, we've been talking about appreciating of the currency and depreciating of the currency. How will you notice? You will notice this on the variable currency, because the base currency is always fixed. Therefore, any changes in the exchange rate will be noticeable on the price currency. For example, if this is today's exchange rate and tomorrow it is 1 USD for Tanzanian shillings 2,375, it means the USD has appreciated in its value relative to the Tanzanian shillings, or in another way around, the Tanzanian shillings has declined in its value, because yesterday you needed few Tanzanian shillings to purchase 1 USD, and today you need even more Tanzanian shillings to purchase exactly the same amount of the USD. Now, You have the issue of direct and indirect quotation. A quotation is considered to be a direct quote if one unit of the foreign currency is expressed in terms of variable units of the domestic currency. If one unit, if one unit of the foreign currency, for example, USD, is expressed in variable units, variable units of domestic currency, for instance, TZS, then we say that is direct quotation. But remember, this quotation needs to happen in Tanzania to be qualified as direct quotation. So, in that quotation, the domestic currency is simply the price currency or the quoted currency, whereas the foreign currency is simply a base. So, on this expression here, assuming that the quotes were done in Tanzania, where Tanzanian shillings is the domestic currency in Tanzania, 1 USD equals to Tanzanian shillings 2,370. A base currency is the USD, whereas price currency or quoted currency is the Tanzanian shillings. If you come across this kind of expression, then this is what we call direct quotation. So in conclusion, direct quotation is when we express a unit of foreign currency by variable units of the domestic currency. And what about indirect quotation? Indirect quotation is simply the opposite of the direct quotation. How? That is when, instead of quoting a foreign unit as a base, now we are going to quote domestic currency as a base. Remember, when we discuss direct quotation, we saw that foreign currency was a base fixed at 1, and domestic currency was simply a price currency or quoting currency, varies. Now, with indirect quotation is the opposite. The domestic currency, the home currency, is expressed in terms of the foreign currency. That is to say, now the domestic currency becomes the base. The domestic currency becomes the base. So here, if the base is domestic currency and price currency is the foreign currency, and the quotes has been done in your country, for example Tanzania, then that is what we call indirect quotation. So in expression like this one or this one, you can see that both quotations or both quotes happens in Tanzania. 1 Tanzanian shillings equals to USD 0.0004, or 1 Tanzanian shillings equals to Ugandan shillings 0.67. But the quotes happens in Tanzania, then this is indirect quotation. Please note the following. Indirect quotation is the opposite of the direct quotation. That is to say, if you are asked to compute the direct quotation of these two expressions, all you have to do is to reciprocate. If you are to reciprocate this figure here To reciprocate means 1 divided by this number. If you are to reciprocate this figure here, you will get a direct quotation of these two currencies. For example, direct quotation of this currency, it means now I want to determine how many Tanzanian shillings will purchase 1 USD. All you have to do is to take 1 divided by 0.0004. So if you were to take the reciprocal, of that number, you'll end up with 2,500, meaning that 1 USD equals to Tanzanian shillings 2,500. Now, how will you determine buying and selling rate under direct quotation? If you are given quotations which are unmarked, for example, you are given quotations which are just like this. For instance, 1 USD equals to 2,500 to 550. They are unmarked. How will you know on whether which price here or which rate here is the selling and which one is buying? How will you determine the bid and ask? To determine correctly the bid and ask, first of all, you need to identify currencies involved. For instance, TZS and dollar. Then the location of the quotation. Let's assume Tanzania. If the selling rate and the buying rate are to be determined correctly, then the higher rate represents the selling rate and the lower rate represents the buying rate. The lower rate is this one. Therefore, this is bid or buying. And the higher rate is this one. Therefore, this is ask or selling. For the indirect quotation, is the opposite. Consider the following example. 1 Tanzanian shillings equals to Ugandan shillings 1620. The higher rate is the buying rate. Therefore, the buying rate is this one. The lower rate is the selling rate. Therefore, selling rate is this one. So this is ask and this is bid. Again, we assume that these quotations were done in Tanzania. So you need to be able to determine. Again, recall these quotations. These quotations happened in Tanzania. I got them from the National Microfinance Bank. You can see, look at the buying, okay? Buying or bid. All bid rates are lower than the ask rate or selling. Look, 2339, 2379. So you see all the bids are lower. Okay. Look at euro, 2,430. Selling is greater than the buying. Look at Japanese yen, 1520. South African rand, 126, 136. Kenyan shilling, 16.8, 20. So you can see in this one is simply direct quotation. Why direct quotation? Because first of all, the Tanzanian shillings is the price currency. Foreign currencies are all fixed at 1. So we come to the currency appreciation and depreciation. A currency appreciates or depreciates with respect to the base and price currency. Appreciation simply means an increase in the value of the currency relative to the other, whereas depreciation is the opposite, so a decline in the value. Now, how do you determine percentage change? To determine the percentage change in the currency exchange rates, you need to have two rates. Okay, you need to have two rates so that you can make a better comparison. For example, let's assume yesterday, 16th of February, the exchange rate of Japanese yen was selling 18 Tanzanian shillings. And today, 17th, the exchange rate of the same currencies selling is 20 Tanzanian shillings. Now, to determine the percentage change, all you have to do is you take or you divide the new rate, which is 20, by the old rate, which is 18. What you get from there, you minus 1, and the whole thing you multiply by 100. If you are to do so, you can end up with what? You're going to end up with 11.1%. So percentage change here is 11.1, meaning that the Japanese yen has increased in its value by 11% relative to the Tanzanian shillings. Or in another way around, you can say the Tanzanian shillings has declined in its value by 11.1. Now, if you want to determine the amount at which Tanzanian shillings has declined its value, you need to transpose this. Okay, on top you use the old exchange rate, and below here you use the new exchange rate. Now, how do we determine spot and forward exchange rates? Of course, the spot rates are given. Remember from the definition, spot rate, the rate that we use to purchase currency for immediate what? Delivery. But what about forward rate? Forward rate is the same as future rate, the rate that we'll use to purchase currencies in the future, in the coming days. Now, forward exchange rates are quoted in terms of points. We call it pips, points in percentage. And the point in percentage is the ratio of 1 by 10,000. Now, if the forward rate is greater than the spot rate, then we say the base currency is trading at a forward premium. I'll say again, if today the exchange rate between euro and Tanzanian shillings is 1 euro by 2,600 Tanzanian shillings, and then the forward rate of Tanzanian shillings by euro becomes, let's say, 2,700. Here you can see that the forward rate is greater than the spot rate. Therefore, we can easily conclude that euro is trading at a forward premium. And the opposite is true. That is, if forward rate is less than the spot rate, then the base currency will be trading at a forward discount. Looking at the future, if one thinks that the foreign currency is going to be more valuable than now, he may say it will trade at premium, if less, at a discount, and if there's no changes, then at par. The dealer quotes fixed the amount of the foreign currency, while the home currency is variable. Remember, the home currency is the quoting currency or price currency. So always the dealer, remember dealers are banks. Okay, I want to use banks more because we are bankers. Dealers are banks. So banks will always quote a single unit of foreign currency. Okay, a single unit of foreign currency for variable units of the domestic currency. Now, how do we obtain the forward rate? We obtain the forward rate by adjusting the spot rates by their appropriate discount or premiums. Okay, so we need to be provided, or we need to determine the premiums or discount that we are going to use to adjust the given spot rate in order to arrive to the appropriate forward rate. Now, under direct quotation, if you are given premium, you will add, and discounts are subtracted. Say again. If the spot rate is, let's say, €1 for Tanzanian shillings, 2600 to 2700. This is direct quotation. And then you are given premium. Then the premium will be added. But if you are given the discount, then the discount will be subtracted. Let's do an example for you to comprehend. In this example, 1 USD is equivalent to Tanzanian shillings 2,350.20 up to 2,370.15. Then we have 1 month forward rate, 30 to 50 discount, 2 months forward, 20 to 15 premium required. Compute the 1 and 2 months forward rate. For you to be able to correctly arrive to the required rates, the appropriate forward rates, number 1, you need to identify the type of quotation. Because after identifying the type of quotation, then we can apply the thumb rule. Now, first of all, we need to locate or to determine the whereabouts of the quotation is Tanzania. Second, what is the domestic currency of Tanzania? Tanzanian shillings. It's clearly stated here. Oh, very good. Therefore, the USD is simply the foreign currency. Now, what kind of quotation has the foreign currency as a base and domestic currency as a price currency? It is direct quotation. Direct quotation, because under direct quotation we are told that foreign currency will be base fixed at 1 and domestic currency will be price currency, which varies. So you see here, Tanzanian shillings are the one that varies. Good. Then let's recall the thumb rule. thumb rule says that under direct quotation, the higher rate is the selling rate and the lower rate is the buying rate. Therefore, here 2,350, here 2,370. So 370 is greater than 350. Therefore, we can confidently conclude that this one is the selling and this one is the buying. Now, what about the thumb rule? The thumb rule says that under direct quotation, if you are given premium, you add them. But if you are given the discount, you subtract them. So, under direct quotation, you're supposed to ensure that at all time, the selling rate is greater than the buying rate. I say again, under direct quotation, you're supposed to ensure that at all time, the selling rate is greater than the buying rate. That being the case, if you are given premium, then add the highest premium on the selling rate and the lowest premium on the buying rate, so that buying will continue to be lesser than the selling rate. And if you're given the discount, remember, discount is supposed to be subtracted. Therefore, to keep the selling rate higher, then from it, subtract the lowest discount and the opposite for the buying, so that buying will continue to be low and selling high. Let's do this example. In this example here, we see that the buying, and on the other side we have the selling. Buying is 2,350.20, selling 2,370.15. Now, 1 month forward, we are given the discount 30 and 50. Now, we're supposed to subtract the discount. However, we should keep selling higher. Therefore, 30 is lesser than 50. Therefore, subtract 50 from the buying and subtract 30 from the selling. Therefore, here the buying rate is going to be 2349.70, and the selling rate is going to be, here is going to be 2369.85. Now you can see here that I have maintained the thumb rule, that is, buying is still low and selling is still high. So selling rate is greater than the buying rate.